Pete Maravich. The initial autopsy report in from Los Angeles today says it was indeed heart disease that killed Maravich yesterday morning in a pickup game in a church court in Pasadena, California. But the exact cause of death will be determined in approximately 2 weeks when more tests are known. Pistol Pete Maravich had just recently released a book. It was entitled Heir to a Dream. And if ever a player lived a dream, it was this man. Just say the name Maravich, or the nickname Pistol Pete, and the mind's eye recalls the flying hair, the floppy socks, the incredible moves. He was box office, and he was a metaphor for what the sport of basketball can be.
I threw a behind-the-back bounce pass during a junior varsity game between a defender's legs. I looked around and I saw the fans and how excited they really got, and that was back in 1959. And I just saw the excitement of entertainment that you could bring to people and that they would really enjoy that. And so I wanted that. It was like a drug inducement to me, and that's the way I'd learned the game anyway.
Pete Maravich was the greatest scorer in the history of college basketball, possessed of skills that now seem decades ahead of their time.
The game itself today is that type of game. It's a game of spectacular moves and spectacular plays.
He was coached by his father, Press Maravich, at LSU. From the early years, Press instilled in his son the need to be different, innovative on the court. Pete's NBA career was, to some, a disappointment. He was an all-star 5 times with mediocre ball clubs.
Through the times that I had playing pro basketball, which were very bad times, you know, you either win or you lose, so it's a flesh-peddling business, and I know that I went through a lot of adversity, but through that adversity, I grew up a great deal.
First with the Atlanta Hawks, then the New Orleans Jazz, Maravich rolled up great numbers. He won the 1977 scoring title and then finished his career as a bit player with the Celtics in 1980. Maravich was often searching for a meaning in his life. He tried a variety of religions, had a great interest in UFOs for a while. But 5.5 years ago, he became a born-again Christian. That faith bolstered him last year when his father died after a long fight with cancer, just after Pete was elected to the Basketball Hall of Fame.
It's really an honor that I really never dreamt of. My goals were lower than that because it looked like unreachable as far as I was concerned when I was growing up.
When he came to Springfield to join the roster of immortals, he spoke of his father.
My dad was really my hero. I mean, he influenced me so greatly in my life, and he influenced me until the day he died.
On the day the Jazz retired Pete's number, Press was asked about his son's legacy.
That he was good for the kids, that he was a good idol, if that's what they wanted in those days. And I feel that as long as they can remember him for that, and not so much for his basketball showmanship or anything else, I think Pete would be very happy to be remembered in that aspect.
Always a very close bond between father and son. Pete Maravich died yesterday morning. He was the all-time leading scorer in NCAA basketball history, the most points, the highest average, 3 times an All-American, most 50-point games, and only he and Oscar Robertson for 3 consecutive years led the NCAA ranks in scoring, 3,667 points. We continue here on ESPN's NCAA basketball. We'll talk with John Ferguson, who telecast and had the radio play-by-play of so many of the great games Pete Maravich had for LSU, so many of the special memories of Pistol Pete from the days in Baton Rouge. That as we continue at halftime after this. As Pete Maravich rewrote the record books, John Ferguson was there calling the radio and TV play-by-play for the LSU Tigers. John, thanks for joining us. What Pete did for the South, I think, that it really has been overlooked a little bit. He put the sport on the map in the South, didn't he?
He did indeed. Bob, I think more than any other one person, Pete Maravich popularized the game of basketball at the college level here at LSU and throughout the Southeastern Conference. He packed them in wherever he went, and he put on, of course, the big basketball show.
There are legendary games, the last game against Georgia when he hit the long hook shot, but you were telling me earlier about the great game when Kentucky came down to Baton Rouge.
Yes, that was in 1970, and it was a big SEC shootout in the Agricultural Coliseum here, seating about 7,000 at the time. And we interviewed the coaches at the beginning of the game. Joe Dean, who's now the AD here at LSU, was working with me as analyst at that time. Press Maravich, the Tiger coach, said, "We're going to give the ball to the boy and see what he can do. If he's hot, there's no telling what will happen." Coach Rupp of Kentucky said, "Well," he said, "I know why everybody came to watch television and came to see the game. Those who could, they want to see the show, and so do we at Kentucky. And we're going to watch the show. We're going to let him do his thing. but we're going to try to stop the other people. Well, they did stop the other people. Kentucky won the game 121-105. Dan Issel, the Kentucky star, had 51 points, but Pete Maravich had 64 in a big SEC shootout. It was a great game.
Press and Pete were so very close, weren't they?
Yes, they were. They were both dedicated to basketball competition. They spent all of their waking hours working toward perfection in the game. And Pete, of course, did not come by his abilities lightly. He worked hard at it, just as Bobby Pettit and a number of other LSU stars in the past have done. And in the Southeastern Conference, he really made his mark because of hard work, I think.
What do you think the people in Louisiana would like to have Pete remembered for?
Well, I think they're going to remember him very fondly as the man who really popularized the game here for LSU, for Louisiana, and the SEC. Prior to the time Maravich came on the scene in the late 60s as a sparkling freshman with all the great moves and with the basketball, a very great player, perhaps the greatest, basketball was not a big thing here. This is football territory. But Maravich helped to turn that all around. People at the time were interested in how many points he scored and what he did, more than an LSU victory or not. But that changed with the passing years, and basketball did indeed gain its true popularity.
In fact, they call the Assembly Center the house that Pete built. John Ferguson, thanks so very much for joining with us. And, of course, all of us here at ESPN, condolences to everyone at the LSU family.
We're saddened by it, but we remember him very fondly as a great player with the basketball.
Thank you very much, John Ferguson, who was there calling so many of the great plays as Pete Maravich rewrote the record books. Georgetown, the record of this game, leading Pitt by...